At Kansas, Cleetus McFarland was in the top 10 when everything collapsed. The number 30 blew apart and transformed a breakthrough afternoon into a full-fledged catastrophe, just as it appeared that he was putting together one of the cleanest and most convincing stock car performances of his career. This is what transpired. Following the controversy surrounding Nascar, which prevented Superspeedway from approving him for the O'Reilly Series, Cleetus entered Kansas in an attempt to gain momentum. Rather, he provided us with one of the most bizarre trajectories in an ARCA race. A charge from the back to the front, a poor official finish, a brand new paint job, a joke about essentially shooting himself, and a mechanical breakdown so spectacular that it spilled oil all over the track and altered the course of the race. Since the final product only reveals a small portion of this plot, we will go over everything in order today. Let's begin with the outcome, which doesn't appear particularly noteworthy on paper. Garrett Mitchell, sometimes known as Cleetus McFarland, officially placed 20th in the ARCA Menard Series, tied 150 at Kansas Speedway on Saturday. The race was extended to 108 laps due to late cautions and overtime, but he finished 75 laps in the number 30 Bald Ford. The race was won by Gio Ruggiero. Cleetus was buried in the final rundown despite running a far stronger race than Daniel Dye, who placed second. I want to be clear about that first. The true nature of this run is entirely lost if you simply consider 20th place. This wasn't a guy who spent the entire day riding in the rear and was given the 20th spot because everyone else wiped out. Before the motor gave up on him, he appeared to have a genuine top 10 result in his hands for a considerable amount of time. He was also going forward and racing nicely. Prior to the actual disaster, this weekend's visual shift was immediately noticeable. When Cleetus arrived in Kansas, the number 30 had a new paint job. According to the Daily Downforce, he was making his ARCA comeback with a fresh appearance. Additionally, Reddit Jones Racing stated that the vehicle would carry on the kinetic collaboration while prominently showcasing bald eagles. A venue for his own merchandise and content. In terms of appearance, this was more than simply the typical Cleetus vehicle reappearing. From the moment it discharged, everything felt different. That new appearance was significant since it coincided with one of his weekend's most hilarious events. The entire sponsorship arrangement essentially rendered himself sponsored because bald is his own platform. Cleetus leaned into that joke prior to the race, repeating his remarks before to the race. He stated, "I'm going to be fired if I don't get a top 10. The punchline was that he was essentially his own sponsor. Thus, Cleetus was mocking the pressure by acting as though his own business was about to fire him. Since it appeared for a while that he was going to deliver precisely what he had joked about, that joke really hit home later. A top 10 was not only feasible, it was there. Please hit like, share, and subscribe to NASCAR Central before we reach the point where the engine lets go. We're working toward 4,000 subscribers. Let's try to reach 100 likes on this one. You've come to the correct place if you enjoy fast-paced NASCAR breakdowns without a filler. This is where the entire narrative shifts, so let's go on to the race itself. For Cleetus, Kansas wasn't just another race. This was his 6th national ARCA Menard Series start in his career, and it came at a crucial moment. He had previously displayed flashes. Earlier this year, he finished 11th at Daytona, and Motorsport reported that he had just finished in the top 5 at ARCA East at Rockingham. Therefore, there was already at least some indication that he was beginning to feel more at ease in these stock cars, even though the National Series resume is still brief. Prior to the weekend, Reddit Jones Racing also clarified that this was intended to be an additional building block. The team emphasized that additional seat time in Kansas was important because it would be his second ARCA start on an intermediate track. Since every race is still a learning process and a testing ground, McFarland himself stated that more laps in larger track conditions were crucial for where he is currently. Additionally, if you were hoping for an early indication that Kansas may do better than some had anticipated, you found one in practice. McFarland finished 13th in the number 30 Bald Ford in ARCA's official pre-race practice results. Although it wasn't front-row speed, it was a reasonable sign that he wasn't turning up entirely disoriented on a 1.5-mile track. Every time a developing driver tries to gain the trust of others, it counts. Then qualification was eliminated. Following the cancellation of qualifying due to bad weather, ARCA's official starting lineup was determined by the rulebook, which placed McFarland at number 25 on the grid. Any possibility of a tidy, peaceful day vanished in an instant. If he wanted anything from Kansas, he would have to deal with traffic, pass cars, and be in an area where lane choice, restarts, and foul air can make life miserable, even for drivers with far more experience than he has. I found the entire race to be quite spectacular at this point. Cleetus gained 11 positions in the opening 5 laps, according to Motorsport. Consider that. By the 5th lap, he had already cut past over half of the pack, having started in 25th place. It's not a fortunate break. That is not enduring chaos. That driver is genuinely moving forward in real time. He was already in 11th place by the midway point. The top 10 was no longer a pipe fantasy. In essence, it was waiting for him there. If people only skim the results, I don't think enough people will enjoy this aspect of the story. Mistakes, spins, and whether NASCAR had seen enough were the main topics of discussion at Rockingham and the O'Reilly vehicle. The conversation might have been the complete opposite at Kansas for a considerable amount of time. This appeared more deliberate. It appeared more tidy. It appeared to be the kind of run you want to see from someone who is constantly being reminded that he needs to make progress. Then things improved much further. Cleetus, according to Motorsport, finished as high as 7th following a 3-wide pass on a mid-RA restart. On the grid, 7th from 25th. It's not just solid. That drive across the field is really striking. Remembering that he was still learning this type of track makes it even more significant. He wasn't merely clinging to the lead lap's tail end. He was assuming roles. He was picking up speed. He was doing the kind of movements that cause people in the garage to pause and briefly raise their heads. By then, the contest had essentially become what his supporters had been anticipating. The same thing is always said by the detractors. Yes, he offers perspectives. Yes, he attracts attention. Is he able to race at this level, though? Kansas was beginning to respond to that with something deeper than a trendy opinion. By the halfway point, he had already moved up from 25th to 11th, then 7th on pace. It's a race. That isn't a ruse. However, the vehicle began to falter. According to Motorsport, McFarland's engine was becoming sour, which caused him to fade after rising as high as 7th. In a similar vein, the Oval source reported that when smoke started to form inside the car, he was in 10th place and had previously been as high as 8th. Thus, what initially appeared to be a slight slowdown in speed was actually the start of the mechanical issue that would ruin his day. The entire thing ultimately gave way with around 25 laps remaining. This is precisely what took place. Oil spilled all over the front stretch as the engine failed in a cloud of white smoke. The crew was not the only ones who saw this small puff. The number 30 from a top 10 car became the focal point of the largest incident on the circuit due to a massive mechanical failure. Additionally, the timing made it feel even more brutal because it occurred while he was still in strong track position. All the hard work was already done by him. At last, the race had turned in his favor. The motor then failed. Even worse, his race was not the only one ended by the failure. He was closely followed by Andy Jen Koch and Isabella Robusto, who both got into the oil, turned, and smashed the wall, according to Motorsport. To clear up the mess, ARCA had to raise the red flag. Therefore, this was more than just Cleetus pulling to the apron and going away in a peaceful mechanical retirement. This turned out to be one of the race's key turning points. Officials halted the event due to oil on the front stretch and other vehicles colliding with it. The blowout was indeed that dramatic. Cleetus managed to keep his own car off the wall despite the oil, smoke, and turmoil, so even in the midst of it all, he provided conversation starters. According to Motorsport's report, he managed to stop the car after sliding sideways in his own oil through turns 1 and 2 without completely losing control. That could be the race's most underappreciated moment. The entire story would be altered if that car suddenly broke and crashed against the wall. Rather, he managed to hold it together. The motor was finished. The race was indeed over. Indeed. However, he was still able to prevent himself from becoming any more damaged as a result of the mechanical breakdown. Then, in typical Cleetus form, he didn't sound devastated. He sounded as though he was well aware of how much better the run had been than the outcome. He was quoted on 3 as stating, "Overall, I had a blast." He went on to say that he would consider it a victory because he completed more than 75% of the marathon. That is a fantastic Cleetus line because, although it seems humorous at first, there is some truth to it. The entire day is in vain if it blows up after 20 laps. However, there is something to learn when you have already risen from 25th to the top 10 and demonstrated genuine speed prior to the setback. He also had one of the better post-race replies on motorsport.com since the save was the first thing he wanted to discuss. He laughed. "Did you see that drift through the entire turn 1 and 2 and then said he was already looking forward to seeing the highlight reel?" In a nutshell, that is Cleetus. There's smoke all over the place. The race over the car is over. And he's already chuckling because the save most likely looked fantastic on replay. Another bit of post-race humor from Oval Insider was ideal for the Kansas plot. In jest, McFarland expressed his desire that BaldEagle.com would not let him go and that he would return for Talladega because of Bald Eagle. He has his own platform, Calm. He is essentially carrying on the joke from before to the race. At first, it was, "Get in the top 10 or you're fired." After that, the motor blows, and he jokes that he hopes the sponsor will still hire him, because it makes the entire tale human rather than turning it into a stiff, overproduced sports media segment. That is precisely the kind of thing his audience loves. And to be honest, I think his attitude, music, here important because if he had ran 22nd all afternoon and never showed anything, this weekend might have easily turned into another "See, I told you so" day after NASCAR refused him O'Reilly's superspeedway approval. Rather, he took the opposite action. He gave folks a race in which the official result is 20th, but the Real run indicates that this guy is figuring it out more quickly than the box score indicates. That's the distinction. Here, too, there is context. According to NASCAR President Steve O'Donnell, advancement is assessed on a race-by-race basis, and Kansas appeared to be making progress prior to the components failing. He began on the 25th. He advanced quickly. By the halfway point, he was in 11th place. When the engine failed, he was still in the top 10 and had reached 8th. Compared to a tidy but unidentified 15th, that is a greater case for development. No, this was not the intended outcome. It wasn't a trophy. The official breakdown did not include it in the top 10. It wasn't even a conclusion. Kansas, however, was one of the most promising McFarland races we have seen in a stock car at this level, in my opinion. The race itself did, not because the final sheet says so. Because of this, the key lesson here is not limited to engine blows. Cleetus is finished. This is the more important lesson. He moved quickly. He moved. He was calm. He also had a car that was in the top 10 for a spell. The run was not erased, but the finish was taken away by the mechanical failure. What comes next is now the obvious question. Cleetus and George Siciliano, aka Squirrel McNutt, are scheduled to return for the ARCA race at Talladega next weekend, according to Motorsport. Thus, there is an instant potential for a rebound. Talladega is the next opportunity to turn that growth into an outcome that people cannot discuss. If Kansas was about demonstrating his ability to navigate through traffic and control an intermediate track, please hit like, subscribe to NASCAR Central, and spread the word about this video if you liked it. Every click contributes to the growth of this channel. Now that we have more than 4,000 subscribers, let's get this one over 100 likes and continue expanding. Tell me this in the comments as well. Do you think Kansas is a catastrophe? Or do you have the same perspective as Cleetus?